Hi, my name is Kelsey Kruse, and welcome to the Restoration Road. Today my guest is my dad, Mitch Kruse. Dad, I think I was 13 years old when you gave me my first personality test, and I want to know why. Because ever since then, my entire life, I've been obsessed with personalities. I love trying to meet someone and analyze like what type of personality they are and what gets them, and I think it comes back to you, so I want you to explain why that is.
Well, I was auctioning about 15,000 collector cars a year, had hundreds of thousands of people attending my business. I dealt with thousands and thousands of people every year, and conflict was everywhere. Two objects attempting to occupy the same space at the same time. In fact, an auction is conflict. Buyer and seller, bidders trying to get the car for just one increment higher than the other. And I was struggling with that. And my uncle, who was an attorney and a theologian, gave me a temperament test. And it was Florence Littauer's Personality Plus test. And I couldn't get enough of it. After I got done, I wanted to learn so much more about myself. And then I thought, whoa, this tells me about other people. This is going to help me like crazy. And there was just this insatiable desire to learn more and more about it. But I applied it immediately. And it is one of the single greatest tools I have ever received on how to get along with people. I began to see God's work through it. I began to see the Bible revealing these ideas, and I'll share that with you as we go, but it's just amazing to me. Hippocrates, the father of medicine, a couple hundred years before Christ, is actually the person who started to talk about this concept. As he dealt with people, he saw that there were 4 dominant personality types. Now, the Bible is really clear. We are uniquely, fearfully, wonderfully made. Each person is totally a unique individual. This is just a tool to help remove blind spots that otherwise might not get removed, okay? So that's where these words come from then, as sanguine, choleric, melancholy, and phlegmatic. And you're asking me to talk about the sanguine first. A sanguine wants to do things the fun way. And so their main objective in life is to have fun. Their emotional desires are attention, acceptance, affection, approval. And those 4 A words, they're just living for that all the time. May not know that. They are the life of the party. They can talk and talk and talk and really never say anything at all, okay? They make life so much fun, but they get depressed when life isn't fun. But they're so loose that they have a tendency, I think, to exhaust the 3 resources of life: time, talent, treasure. Time, they're almost always late. Talent, they find themselves involved in areas of expertise where they don't have that expertise.
Because they just want to be involved in everything.
Just want to be involved, or they're so optimistic they see that they can do it. Treasure, they're usually in debt. Huge credit card debt unless they learn how to manage it. And so they are an absolute blast. They love they love everything being new every day. Nothing is ever the same. My cousin Kenny is this. And Kenny, after his father died in a car accident, came to work with us at Cruise International, and he traveled with me everywhere for about 5 years. And Kenny got these really cool cowboy boots on a trip we had in Dallas, and he wore them all the time. Well, Kenny would clip-clop on his boots every time that he walked into the building, so you get to bakoom, bakoom, you'd have that little beat going underneath, and Kenny would announce that he was there. And everybody in the building's on the phone. And he said, "Yo, how you doing?" And everybody's on the phone, but he's loud and doesn't really think about it. So he goes back in this marketing department where there are really no room dividers or anything, and so everybody can hear him. And he would yell, "Yo, Sal!" I'm Sal, he's Guido, and that's a whole nother story.
Yeah.
But I can't hear him. He's way in the other part of the office building, but that's what he does. He would announce it and say, "Yo, Sal!" He starts clipping, so he kind of went to his desk, sort of almost sat down, yelled at me. This is how he started every day. Yelled at me, and he'd start walking down the hallway. And sanguines have nicknames for people. So he'd be clip-clopping down the hallway, and then I can start to hear, "Yo, Sweet Weed! Stoner Donor! Pammy B! Yo, Sal!" And he hasn't seen me yet. He's turning around the corner. He'd be where my assistant is outside my office. "Is Sal in?" And he wouldn't wait for an answer, and he'd walk through.
Yeah.
And I'm on the phone. I'm always on the phone by the time he got there. And he'd act surprised every day, because sanguines usually have no memory, okay? And he'd say, which means you're going to be on the phone a long time or a little time. To which I'd almost like put the phone like there, and I'd go like somewhere in between. He'd do one of two things. He would either go like this. He'd go, turn around, because he didn't have patience. And he'd go, "Baby B, sweet weed," and he'd go down and he'd leave. Or he would tell me what was so urgent on his mind while I was on the phone with the customer who might want to sell a car for $1 million. And so he'd go, "Yo, Sal!" And, and I do that, and he'd go, "Did you see my Brownies on Monday Night Football? Oh, baby bees!" So they're just so much fun. He was the life of the party. It was so much fun to travel with. But I'm not kidding you, Kelsey. Sometimes it'd be like this. "Kenny, what happened on the Jaguar?" "What Jaguar, Sal?" "The Jaguar that just went out." "Huh?" And he's working with the seller the whole time. I said, "Kenny, the red Jaguar XKE Roadster that we just auctioned right now. What happened there with the seller when you were talking to him?" "Oh, Sal! Hey, buddy! A little here, a little there."
I'm sure he loves that you're talking about him right now on television.
Oh, he does.
Like this.
Oh, he'd love it. He'd call in if he could. It'd be great. So that's the sanguine. Do things the fun way. Attention, affection, acceptance, approval. They're looking for that.
All right. Take us through the next one.
Okay, let's do choleric. Where a sanguine is a fun way, choleric's my way. Choleric is very much about control, and they want people to give them credit for their accomplishments. However, the weakness is they get depressed when life feels like it's out of control. And their weakness is that they run over people. Control literally means to roll against. So their will rolls against other people. Sometimes they even do it to God in their own minds. So I remember I had somebody who worked with me that had this temperament, wonderful person, very talented, and just outstanding. But she was going to have a baby about the same time that we were going to have Megan, your older sister. She came to me one day, and she said, after our kids were born, and so we're right in the same mindset, and she said, "I want to work out of my home." I called her by name and I said, "We're the biggest in the world at what we do. What you do for us is extremely important. I don't know." And it clicked inside me right there. She's probably a choleric, a spirit-led one, sweet as can be. And I thought, if I'm ever going to take a shot at this and try to make it work for her, because I don't want to lose her, I'll give it a try. I did, and she was amazing. She could multitask. She would come in when it was the photo deadline for some of the things that she would need to do the graphic design for brochures, and she was just amazing, a multitasker, had initiative, and it worked, and it worked because of her personality.
And a lot of times cholerics will anybody can be a leader, but I feel like natural born leaders, because they're completely fine with stepping up and taking charge of like what's going on.
Mm-hmm. They're used to being in control, and what you said is accurate. I have a philosophy though that anyone can lead.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly. I had a feeling you did. Okay. How about let's do melancholy.
Okay. Sanguine wants to do things a fun way. Choleric, my way, and melancholy, the right way. They appreciate a lot of S words in their emotional makeup. Silence, sensitivity, support. They want to be perfect. Whereas sanguine is popular, choleric is powerful, melancholy wants to be perfect. They're very meticulous at what they do. I had, obviously, melancholy temperaments who work for me. But frankly, this is me. Actually, I'm a unique combination. I'm the melancholy and the sanguine, so I can have a conversation within myself. It's great.
Oh, that's fun.
I'm never alone. So here's what a melancholy does. A melancholy has a huge fear of being misunderstood, and a melancholy is a perfectionist, right? And a melancholy remembers the negative. Fear of being misunderstood, perfectionist remembers the negative.
You just described me.
Yes, I know.
You just did.
So, remembering the negative, let me cover that for a minute. If I walk down the hallway to my car in our house, and we have beautiful woodwork, and I see a nick in the woodwork, do I remember the 99.99% beautiful woodwork or the nick?
The nick.
When I get to my car, and I'm getting ready to open the door, and I see this little hairline scratch that some girl's jewelry, one of my daughters probably did above the door handle. Do I remember the 99.99% beautiful paint and the clear coat protection that I have on it, or do I remember the little scratch that came from somebody's jewelry?
Scratch.
I sure do. In a conversation with someone, after I leave and I reflect on it, and I think, why'd they say that in that kind of tone? Do I remember and dwell on the negative in a relationship, or do I overlook it and see all the positive?
You see the negative.
Yeah. So this can really be devastating, really devastating. I think one of the things we got to ask ourselves is, why did God make us this way, and what gifts are we misusing? And that question has changed my life, big time.
Even with these stories you're saying about, do you notice the scratch? Do you notice the nick in the wood? There was a time when you and I were practicing for basketball, and you were rebounding for me, and I was shooting threes. And we were at the top of the key, and you probably remember this. So we're shooting threes, and usually what we do is we make 10 in each spot, and then we rotate to a new spot.
You were unbelievable, Kelsey.
Thank you. I made 9 in a row. So I needed to make 10 to move on. I made 9 in a row, and I shot the 10th, and I missed. And I was just like, ah! And you looked at me, and you're like, what? You're like, you just made 9 in a row. That was great. And I was like, but I wanted to be perfect. I wanted to be 10 for 10, because once I reached, 9 for 9, I was like, okay, I need to get this. And the fact that I just missed that one shot made me so upset.
Let me tell you something. 9 in a row is pretty good. You're in pretty good company. Yeah, that's true. And you're doing the same thing. You being like me has been one of the best ways that I've seen for me to use what I've been through and how I understand myself to help you understand yourself.
Oh, yeah. And I'm thankful for it, because I swear sometimes that you know me better than I know myself, and it can be a little scary, but it's extremely helpful.
So let's go to phlegmatic.
Okay.
Phlegmatic sounds weird.
It does.
What it is sanguine wants to do things fun way, choleric, my way, melancholy, the right way, popular, powerful, perfect. Phlegmatic wants to do things the easy way, and they're peaceful. I might add highly practical. And what they thrive on is harmony. They want to avoid conflict at all costs. They want to be respected. They like honor, usually. I've noticed that they have a tendency to like tradition, symbols, keep things steady, Eddie, and the same. They can think that they're in a groove, but they really might be in a rut. So I had a phlegmatic who worked for me, several, obviously, but I noticed that they wanted an even keel environment, and that they have a tendency, if you had a megaphone and you talk in the small end, it amplifies everything, right? That's what a sanguine does. Magnifies, exaggerates, virtually everything, okay? Which I think is fun. You flip that around, and the phlegmatic talks in the big end, and they muffle everything. So they're very careful. They see themselves as controlling, so they tend to be very careful and divide by 10 what they're saying. So here's the problem. The sanguine and the phlegmatic think that each is doing what they're doing. So when a sanguine exaggerates, the phlegmatic thinks, I cut everything down. They must really be upset. And the sanguine hears the phlegmatic and thinks, that's nothing at all. Because they're exaggerating. So I call that the megaphone effect. I want to kind of analyze, synthesize, evaluate here for a minute. Let's start with the melancholy. Melancholy has high expectations of self and high expectations of others. So melancholy is always frustrated. Expectations are never met. One of the spiritual things that needs to happen with the melancholy is they need to release their expectations. We can't control the future.
I experienced that even just with my volleyball season this year, and afterwards we're kind of reflecting on the season. I realized I came in with high expectations for not only because I had worked really hard, so I came in with high expectations that I was going to be a lot better than I was last year and play a lot better. And I also had high expectations that our team overall was just going to be better this year and we were going to win more games. And I came in with those high expectations, and when those weren't necessarily met, when I didn't always play to my full potential, when my team didn't end up winning as many games as we would have liked, it frustrated me, and it was extremely hard to deal with that throughout the season.
It is. Frustration. Not to belabor that point, but what you want to do is live in the moment. You either prove your ability or improve your ability, and you want to have an improve your ability and not define yourself by the outcome mentality. And by living in the moment, ironically, makes you much more effective, and you will win more. It's very interesting how it works, and especially if you're working to improve. But a melancholy has high expectations of self, high expectations of others. A choleric doesn't like to hear this, but they function as if they have higher expectations of others than they do themselves. My dad is this is how they relate to the outside world. My dad is probably choleric and sanguine. And one day, we were going to the airport. We were flying commercially that day to an auction, and we had to be in an auction that night in Boston, Massachusetts. We are late, which happened once in a while. We exit I-69. Back then, we would take the exit where 24 is. And he wanted me, here's what he shouts at me, pass everybody on the right and then turn left right in front of them all. Dad, I'm not doing that. Whoa, we're way too late to talk about that kind of thing. You can't worry about getting a ticket. I do it all the time. Pass them all on the right and turn left right in front of him when the light turns green. I said, Dad, I'm not doing that. And he about goes ballistic on me. We get to the airport. We were Delta's biggest customer. There was a new agent behind the ticket counter, and I believe she did not know that. And all the time back then in a pre-9/11 world, they would let us on the plane. They'd reopen the plane for us. It didn't matter whose boarding pass the name was in. They knew who we were, and we had our group, and we just got on. Well, they wouldn't let us on. My dad starts getting loud. And he says, like Babe Ruth calling his shot, he goes, I'm going to kick the counter. So here's this 300-pound guy in his wingtip shoes and his suit, and he drops three steps, and he takes 3 steps forward, and he kicks the counter really hard. And by this time, newspapers and magazines had come down all around, and everybody's watching, okay?
At least he announced it, I guess.
Yes, he did. Well, my point is, if he were behind the counter, he would say, look, pal, I don't make the rules. You were late, So whatever side they're on, the expectations will change for what they're trying to accomplish.
That makes sense.
And then who do you think he blamed the whole way there to the auction that we were late and missed our plane and had to take other flights?
I want to either say the lady at the counter or you for not passing the cars.
His son for not passing the cars on the right and turning left in front of him. So that's the choleric's expectations. And emotions are a function of expectations. So that's why this is so important. A phlegmatic has high expectations of self and low expectations of others. That's why they're so easy to be around. A sanguine has low expectations of self and low expectations of others. And they're just a blast.
Everything is great.
Sanguines and phlegmatics are people-oriented. Cholerics and melancholies are task-oriented. This is one of the most important things we're talking about is right now. Yeah. Because when conflict occurs, the sanguine and the phlegmatic are going to put the person ahead of the task. A melancholy and a choleric are going to put the task ahead of the person. Mm-hmm. That's huge. That's huge. So the people-oriented people think the task-oriented people are kind of rude. The task-oriented people think the people-oriented people aren't getting anything done.
Yep.
And that's enormous. The sanguines and cholerics want to change the environment. The melancholies and phlegmatics don't want change. 2/3 of the people are actually extroverts, sanguines and cholerics. They get their energy by being around other people. Mm-hmm. 1/3 of them are the melancholies and phlegmatics. When I came across that stat, I really questioned it because I thought maybe more people would be introverted. It was really interesting, but there's a study that says that. Let me kind of tell you now from a biblical standpoint. I think the human heart, not the physical heart, but the spiritual heart, is comprised of 4 chambers, and you can remember them in the acronym WISE, W-I-S-E. Will is the chamber of our choices. I is the intellect, the mind, the chamber of our thoughts. S is the lead chamber of our prayers. Paul says, I pray with my mind, so these really aren't all divided up inside of us, but it's just a way to remember what's going on. Mm-hmm. And then E is emotions, the chamber of our feelings, okay? So when we surrender to God, we choose to, think to, pray to, and want to, okay? Mm-hmm. I believe that a choleric leads with the chamber of the will, and that desire for control is big. Mm-hmm. I believe that the melancholy leads with the intellect or the mind. Think things through, analyze, detail.
Yep.
I think that the phlegmatic actually leads with the spirit, a little less spirit. And that's kind of how they can separate themselves from the environment and just be even keel. And I think the sanguine leads with the emotions. Now, those are the 4 chambers of the heart, but the heart beats with desires. The choleric leads with the will, but their desires to have control. The melancholy leads with the mind. Their desires to have security. And God gave us each of these desires. We all have all 4. The phlegmatic leads with the spirit. Their desire is contentment. Primary desire would be contentment. And the sanguine leads with the emotions, and their main desire is significance. So God gave us these desires in the Garden of Eden. He gave us control. You rule over the earth. He gave us security by giving us every fruit-bearing tree, every seed-bearing plant, everything that we need. He gave us contentment, the desire for contentment, by blessing us and having us be multipliers. We're content enough to multiply. Subdue the earth means to bring contentment to the earth. And then he gave us the desire for significance by being made in his image. So here's what we do as sinners. We pursue control apart from God, and life gets out of control. We pursue security apart from God, and we're insecure like crazy. We pursue contentment apart from God, and we're discontented. And we pursue significance apart from God, and we feel continually more and more insignificant. And it's like a wheel, and we go to the outside of the wheel to accomplish more quicker, and we're just dissatisfied. But Christ is at the hub, and he's where all 4 quadrants meet. And here's the big deal. There's nothing more powerful than the power of God in Christ. And the Bible tells us that Christ is the power of God. And he's greater than our desire for any control apart from him. When we want security, we want something to be true all the time. Christ is the truth of God, the Bible tells us. and he is true all of the time, and his truth is greater than any desire for security apart from him. When we want to be content, all we really are looking for is peace. And the Bible tells us that Christ is the peace of God. And his peace is greater than any desire for contentment apart from him. When we pursue significance apart from God and feel insignificant, there's nothing more significant than the God of the universe loving us so much that it's called grace. Undeserved love, unmerited favor. And we learn that his love and his grace is greater than any pursuit of significance apart from him. So Christ is truly the answer that each of us is created for, and the answer that each of us is seeking is all in Christ. The power, the truth, the peace, and the love of God. And so it's just interesting how God's put it all together. And then how you deal with these people is really unique. I think God helped give me this. 1 Thessalonians 5:14 says to confront the unruly, comfort the timid, support the weak, be at peace with all. At some point when there's conflict, you're going to have to confront a choleric. It means face-to-face, doesn't mean you're rude, but you got to do it. Mm-hmm. The problem is we tend to confront the timid and comfort the unruly.
Because they're intimidating.
Exactly. A melancholy, to lead them in conflict, they need to be comforted. Come alongside and strengthen. You actually teach them. That's how they learn their way through it. Support. If a sanguine feels unsupported, they don't feel the attention, acceptance, affection, approval, they go south in a hurry. They got to feel supported with whatever you're going through. Mm-hmm. And then peace. If you're not peaceful, you will never get along with a phlegmatic. So I think that's really helpful to see how God's word is the ultimate authority on this subject, mm-hmm. and can help us learn how to get along with others.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Dad, thank you so much for not only talking with me today, but for giving me that first personality test when I was 13 years old. Hopefully something we talked about today is helping you understand not only yourself better, but those around you. And ultimately the goal in knowing personalities and how to deal with them is so you can further those relationships with other people and then further their relationship with God. So hopefully you found something to be encouraging to you today.